we're here on the banks of the tidal River Trent at Sutton on the Barbel Society water. I'm with the gaffer from the hookbait company, Darren McCann. Nice to see you, Darren.
And you, mate.
How have you been keeping?
Very good, very busy. Thankfully the last few weeks have been busy with bait orders again after all the COVID problems happened.
Yeah, I can imagine that did impact quite a bit, the COVID situation. I think that's impacted everybody, hasn't it?
Definitely, and especially after the crap winter we had as well, with all that flooding. It's just been terrible for everybody all round, but touch wood, everything seems to be going in the right direction now, and people are starting to get back out and do what they enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. I know it's a bit dire at the moment with the tide coming up and things not really having it at the moment, but hopefully we can get things changed, and it's the ideal time to talk about the baits and how we got to this sort of situation.
Yeah, that's one thing I did want to ask you, if you can tell us about your fishing history, what got you into fishing, etc., and how old were you when you started and things.
Well, I was actually very late getting into fishing. I left school at 17. I'd never fished before in my life, and my cousin said, do you fancy coming out and do a bit of tench fishing? I said, well, you'll have to show us the ropes, and quickly picked it up, and we started fishing Farlows, because I used to live in London at the time. Very quickly we started catching tench, and I thought, oh, I like this. So we were using the standard Richworth Tutti Frutti boilie. This is back in '86.
Old classic.
I know, well, at the time boilies were only around for like 6 or 7 years, so it was still quite new, and everybody was buying ready-mades. They were very good. But after a time, when you started catching all the fish, you want to start experimenting and making your own things. And just when I got the bug for making baits myself, it was around about 88, 89, it was a time when Cotswold Baits were making a big name for themselves. They were very forward thinking. There was Brian Parker, who was a person that used to get really into the bait making, the chemical analysis of it all. It just really hit a nerve with me, and I thought, I want to experiment further. I used to go to a tackle shop in Twickenham where I worked, called T&S, and Brian and Andrew both run Cotswolds. They came over and they decided to do one of these presentation nights down at the pub. So there's about 15, 16 of us all turned up. Brian and Jock, as he was known, was showing us all these pictures of all these fantastic carp that are catching over at Yateley on the Cops Lake and over on all the others. So they weren't fishing the north, but they certainly did Car Park Lake, Match Lake, but it was the Cops where they had most of the recognition. So you started with the tench fishing. Did that quickly develop into the carp fishing then? No, it didn't. I was tench fishing for about 2 years. Then I thought I'd have a go for the carp, because that's what my cousin was catching, but I couldn't catch them for the life of me. And
I know the feeling. I remember when I was a kid, when I used to go fishing with my dad, I was catching roach and perch like this, and my dad was catching tench and carp like this, and I'm like, why can't I catch those? Then when we were on the Trent, it was my dad catching chub and I'm catching gudgeon.
I went back to the lakes and decided I was going to try and go for the carp. Tried with all the usuals like the Tutis and the pineapple Hawaiians and that, but all I was catching was tench. So as I say, at the time Cotswold Baits were around, so I picked up a couple of packets of, I think they called it Yellow Warbler, which was their base mix, and I got some Ultimate Strawberry flavour and some oils, and I made up my very first batch. It was just a pound mix, and I took it down to Farlow's. First fish on it was an 8-pound tench, so I was absolutely over the moon with it, because I'd never caught a fish that big. They'd all been like 3 and 4 pounders up to it.
Yeah, 8 pounds are a really good fish.
Yeah, it's still my personal best to now. Second fish was probably about 45-50 minutes later, and it was my very first carp, and it weighed 19 pounds exactly, and I was 19 years old 2 weeks previous to that. So it was a late birthday, and that, holding up this huge fish, I didn't hold it properly because I was a bit of a novice, so I'm cradling it like that. Still got the photos of it, but something said this is where you want to be going. So I spent the next 5 years or so concentrating on Farlows, catching lots of carp, and my mixes were getting better and better. I started progressing from warbler and I went on to the meaty base mixes and liver. Enjoyed a lot of success. I had carp to just over 21.5 pounds, so I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed making baits more.
So in those early days when you were making the baits, where was it that you gained your knowledge from and your insight into what to add to your mixes, etc.? Whereabouts did you find that information from?
Lots and lots of reading. As I say, I was very impressed with Brian and Andrew at Cotswold, but my biggest influence was Rod Hutchinson. I read all of his books. I'd read about all of his uses of pulses and things when he's fishing likes of red mire, and then he progressed to making his baits, and he started off with Catchem back in '88 or whatever it was. I got all of his recipes that I could, and I started experimenting and using different things like sodium caseinate, lactalbumins. It was all a bit touch and go, because it was a case of you think what would go together doesn't actually go together, and you've got to experiment it and think logically about it. And I sort of picked up a knack of learning quite quickly what works with each other.
Yeah, so being young and inexperienced, obviously, at bait making, obviously you'd put your work in on the bank with the experimenting and testing your different mixes as well, I suppose.
Yep. I moved on from Farlow's after about 5 years, and I started fishing other lakes within the Colne Valley. One of them was Pit 3, which was over in Denham near Savay Lake. Did very well on there. I was mixing up bird food mixes at that time with a really potent plum flavour. At that time, Premier Baits were doing the business, and they were just literally catching everywhere, and one of the big things that was catching was the use of nod oil.
What oil?
Nod oil.
Well, what's nod oil? Explain that one to me.
At the time when it was brought out, it was just a wonder oil that if you poured it into any mix, it helped improve your catches. Of course, everybody started doing it. It's using it on fish meals, but I wasn't using fish meals, I was using birdseed, but it did help. And after investigating, I found out that actually nod oil was just cod liver oil. Kept it secret for the time being, because obviously they wanted to capitalise and make some money, which they did. Jeff Bowers is a very, very shrewd businessman. I've got a lot of respect for him. But say I've picked up from different people and basically pulled all of the knowledge of other people into my mixes, and I just started developing, and I eventually got onto Horton. And at the time, Carp Company had just about come around, and they were bringing out their Icelandic red with caviar and cranberry, and there were 6 or 7 people fishing at Horton at the time on this bait, and everybody was catching. So I spoke to my mate Tony Parker. He had a word with Julian at Carp Company, and he got me some base mix over. So I rolled it up with the caviar and cranberry mixes. Really liked it, and my first fish out of Horton was one of the stockies from Sutton. It weighed 23.5 pounds, and that was my biggest carp to date. So I thought, brilliant, this is working. So I carried on making it, and a few of the other lads said, oh, as you're making it, can you make me some hook baits? So I started making little pots of hook baits for everybody, and was just handing around. I wasn't charging anything, I was just quite happy for people to try them. So it wasn't my own mix, I was just making it, but I was getting better and better and better at it. Eventually, Julian asked me if I'd consider rolling for him, and I said, well, you have to understand that I don't have any machinery, everything's done by hand. I was using garden rollers and stuff like that. So he said, right, well, we'll give you a bit of a trial, you can try it out, and he gave me 300 kilos as a first order. And I said, right,
a nice small order to start with.
So anyway, it took me about a week and a half to sort it out, doing it manually with the rollers, but I managed to do it. He was really impressed with the consistency of the bait. They weren't perfectly round, I mean, I wasn't using a machine, but my argument was, well, if you want a perfectly round bait, a carp's not going to go around and say, well, that was not quite right, I'm not going to have it. And he was of the same opinion. He said, so long as it binds together, doesn't fall apart, this, that and the other, and you use the recipe that we say, that's fine. So I carried on rolling for him. It lasted for about 3 months. Things changed and I decided that I wanted to start up my own business, so I moved lock, stock and barrel over to Wales from London. I set up my own business. So I stopped all the rolling because obviously it was just too far to do anything, and I stopped carp fishing because where I moved there wasn't any carp fishing around.
So did you stop fishing for good?
I stopped fishing for 1.5 years, concentrated on setting up the business. I took on a sales rep and he was an angler and he liked to fish for barbel. And he said there's got to be some rivers around here, so in the spare time after work we used to start looking around on maps to see what there was, and there was obviously the upper Severn and there's a few tributaries as well. And he said, well, let's go and have a look and see what there is. So we went and did a couple of recce's and we found a really nice stretch just past Welshpool, a little place called Forden. And it was all run by Birmingham anglers, so we got a couple of tickets because we'd seen some chub the first day that we'd seen basically pulled up. Set about fishing, just with the usual things, sweet corn, luncheon meat, stuff like that. And I caught my very first chub. It was £5.2.
Not a bad first chub.
I know. Little did I know at that time how special that river was. Because we had seen them flashing around, and I thought, right, I'm going to start doing me boilies again. So I still had some of the old Icelandic red mix, so I looked up some 10 mils and I went down there with Steve. He went down there with the luncheon meat sweet corn approach. I went in with the boilies. First session didn't catch anything, but I thought it's too soon to give up on it. Another 3 sessions I went down there, didn't catch anything. Persevered with it, and then I caught my first chub, and that was £6.3. So I was absolutely made up because I'd never caught a chub that size. Followed it up with a £6.7, and that actually went into the Angling Times because I was so pleased. A fish of that size on the upper Severn, I just thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really happy with the boilies on there. I did a piece for the Chub Study Group all about it as well, because the first year that I joined the Chub Study Group I caught 24 chub over £5, and that was in the space of 4.5 weeks. And it was just absolutely phenomenal, and this was all on the boilies.
This all on the upper Severn as well?
Yeah, all on the upper Severn, all on the Icelandic red. Things started to peter off a little bit, and I decided to go back to making up my own mixes. I wanted to try and intercept the barbel because up until then I've not caught anything. So I kept thinking, what's the best bait that barbel would like? And I said it's got to be sable, but it's got to be a bit of fish meal in there. Wanted a bit of liver, but not too much because I didn't want to overpower it and bring the bream in, because bream love liver. So I made up 3 different mixes, and I started fishing with it. Caught the chub and the bream, but I caught a barbel on the second time. It was only about £8.5, but it was my very first barbel. So I thought, well, this is something. So hopefully there's something going on here. Steve got onto it. He took some of the bait with me. We both did an approach where we'd go down there twice a week after work. I'd go to one section, he'd go upstream, and we compare how we work.
Yeah.
And between us we had 7 barbel. Biggest one was 9.25 pounds. I was really happy with the bait, and it's a very first bait that I decided that I was going to try and sell, because at the time I just got onto eBay and I thought I'm going to try and sell pots of hook baits to try and...
Is that where the name come from, Hook Bait Company?
That's where it came, because of the pots of hook baits. So this is back in 2001. That bait that I developed, that I was catching the barb, I then called it River Secret.
Ah, the old River Secret.
Yeah, that was the very first bait that I made under the guise of the Hook Bait Company, and for 4 years it worked really, really well. I made a promise to my then wife that I'd bring her back to Yorkshire, because that's where she was originally from. So we moved to Huddersfield. Again, I stopped fishing for a while because I was interested in trying to find some work to keep me going, but I was still selling baits on eBay through the Hook Bait Company. It started picking up and I was getting like a loyal fan base. People started asking me for supply of kilos of bait rather than pots of bait, so started doing that. I developed from River Secret. I was now making up a new bait called Natural Crave. That was doing very well because it was full of lots of natural ingredients, lots of crushed up insects, it had proper worm juice in it. Everything you can think of that's in a river was inside here. Loads of fish meal. Lots of fish were catching on it, and people were saying that they were getting personal bests. So as the name started to fluctuate a little bit, I thought, right, I need to develop this more. So I started selling kilos of baits, doing bait dips, pop-ups, the like, and then I started fishing the Trent, and I got to hear about yourself, and you very kindly decided to help me out with the website, and from doing that website, that's where it really kicked off. It didn't take off in a big way, but people started to talk about it because people were catching on the Trent with things like the Spicy Meat Pro that we'd done. 3B was always a very good bait anyway.
Talk to me a little bit about 3B, because when I first heard of the Hook Bait Company and yourself, 3B was the flagship bait of the company. By this time Ian Nairn had come on board with the company, and he was catching a lot of chub on the 3B. So talk to me a little bit about 3B and where that concept came from.
So in 2009 I applied to join the chub study group. Ian Nairn was the club secretary at the time. He sent me back a letter saying that my application had been put into the next chapter of the Chevin, which was their quarterly brochure. I got Ian Nairn to try out my bait. I was very cheeky. I'd only known him for a couple of weeks. I said, I make baits, this is what I do, this is what I've been catching on, and I offered him to try the River Secret. And he said, well, I'll give it a go, but he said, I'll tell you now that I'm Nutribaits, Trigger Ice, have been for years, because he was best mates with Lampard, and that's all they fished with. They fished the Dorset Stour at Canford, caught everything on Trigger. Gave him some River Secret, and by me he started catching big chub, up to over £6 on the River Secret. He said, I like this.
I can imagine.
He said, I'm going to use this now and nothing else, and give it a proper go, see how we go. Anyway, he caught some huge chub, well over £7, and I'd just never seen chub of that size caught on my baits. He was sending through all these pictures, and I thought, brilliant, brilliant. A couple of weeks later, I decided to make what's now known as 3B. I thought I wanted something different. Ian said that he liked baits that had a fruity flavour in them, and I went back to the days of rolling the Carp Company because it had the cranberry in it, which everything picked up on. I thought, well, there's no reason why chub and barber won't pick up on a sweet flavour. So I came up with the concoction, which is now known as 3B, and I brought 5 kilos down with me for the second session because I was working down there for 6 weeks. I gave Ian 2 kilos, I had 2 kilos myself. First cast, Ian pulled out a 6-pounder. You think, oh hey boy, the way that he does, he says, these are working. I said brilliant. So I cast in, didn't have anything first off because they're tiny little twitchy bites. They're not rod benders or anything like that. Eventually learned to strike into one of them, and I had a 4-pounder. Then I followed it up with a big 5. Then I had a 610. Today is still my biggest chub, and I was absolutely over the moon. Ian said, right, enough of the River Secret, I'm sticking with the 3B, and he's been on it ever since. So
yeah, I know Ian's been a long time advocate of 3B, and he's always promoting it.
He uses boilies throughout the summer, and then it's paste, and then it's cheese paste in the winter. I mean, there's nobody better with cheese paste than Ian. He used to make it up for Terry. It's just absolutely fantastic. I would say it's still my personal favourite bait.
3B?
Yep. If I had one bait to fall back on, that's the one, because I know it will catch chub, barbel and carp.
Okay, Dan, so you mentioned there Ian fishing with cheese paste in the winter, and there being nobody better, and he used to make it obviously for Lance and everything. So was that sort of the inspiration behind the big cheese as well?
It was. I did ask Ian what was his secret to making the perfect cheese, and he very kindly told me what exactly went into his cheese mix, bar one. He said, I've got to keep that secret. I said, yeah, no problem at all. But I started making it up, and I thought, oh, this is very good. So I wanted to add something to the armoury for the chub anglers. So obviously you've got the carp anglers and the barbel anglers during the summer and autumn months, and I wanted the business to carry on through the winter. So I'm not just sat there doing nothing and just having to go out working around hospitals. So I came up with the big cheese mix based on Ian's recipe, but obviously I had a few tweaks for myself. It started off as a standard cheese-based mix, which you had to freeze. So obviously if anybody ordered it, I had to send it out the same day, tell them to get it in the freezer, and then to break off what they wanted for a session. So if I was saying they took a kilo mix off me, then I'd tell them to take like a tennis ball slice of cheese. Keep it as flat as possible so it's still malleable, so you can break a piece off straight away. You can do it in your hands and you can start to mould it. Started to take off very well. I'll admit it, one of the main constituents in it was butyric acid, because like Lee Sword said, it smelled like a tramp 3 months dead. It was absolutely awful. But obviously the fish like butyric acid. Garlic was the second recipe that went into the big cheese. As soon as I put the garlic in there, that was it. The catch rates of everybody just went through the roof. Even Ian then asked me for a base mix of the big cheese. I said, well, you make your own cheese base? He said, well, I want to try it with mine. He said, obviously yours is the carrier that makes it more soluble, and it makes it better in the winter months because it's not protein based, so it doesn't go into a solid lump in the coldest conditions. So
that's a problem when you're using the pastry and everything.
It is. Well, that's the big thing. Everybody's got their own recipes, and everyone comes out with, you add a bit of pastry. No, do not add pastry. It just turns into fatty lumps. And if you're fishing it directly onto the hook, you try and pull through it, you get that lump, and you're not going to hit that fish. I've come up with a pure milk protein that is just as soft as you like, but it doesn't fall off straight away, it still sticks to the hook. So Nanny tried it, and he still uses it till this day with his own cheese mix. I now do a shelf life mix as well, because obviously people was buying it from me, but they were saying, bloody hell, I don't know, I'll stick the house out, my missus gives me nightmares. So I decided to do them in pots, 250ml. But send that out to people. They don't have to make up in the kitchen. happy wives, let them go out fishing. So that's my winter bait that I'll sell on to anybody. It'll catch any fish. Barb will get caught on it as well. From the cheese paste mixes, we went on to flaky. I couldn't believe that nobody had come up with the concept of making a flake-based bait out of human grade stuff. There was obviously floating bread made out of rubber and stuff like this, but nobody had made anything out of boilies or boiling material. So I crafted some under the big cheese guys, and again I gave some to Ian. I used it. At the time, we had the likes of Jerry, who was on board with you at the same time, Lee Swords. They were all using the flaky and everybody loved it. The idea that you can go and fish in the river with a piece of flake, knowing that it's still there when the minnows can't peck it because it's quite solid. You can still pick little bits off it, but with it being a solid mass, you can cast out a lot further.
One thing I found with the flaky, which was really good on areas of fish where there was slightly more pressure on the trend, where there were clubs with lots of members, etc. So you tend to find when I'd rock up there on a Thursday or a Friday, it'd be quite empty, but as it got to the weekend it started filling, so the stretch had become quite busy. That change from a regular boilie to a flaky would make all the difference, and I'd catch where other people had struggled, because it's just something completely different that the fish have not seen before, which to me was a bit of a game changer back then as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I couldn't believe nobody had come up with the idea, so I wrote the process down on my computer and I've copyrighted it. Yeah, people can copy it, but it's my invention. I haven't been able to patent it because I'd already been using it. The idea of patenting something is something that nobody's ever seen, and because I'd already done a piece in the Angler's Mail about it, there's no way to patent it, so I've done a copyright on it. It's very fiddly to make it, but
I've seen the process and I agree with that. It's very fiddly.
I've got the patience of a saint, so I make it up. We now do the pop-up version as well, which I'm hoping that some of the carp anglers will get onto for zig rigging and stuff like that, because obviously if you're fishing a big pond, you can fish with bread flake and it'll come off the hook and it'll float out to the middle, and the carp think, oh, that's a nice safe bit of bread. But if you're using a flaky, you can whack it out 50, 60, 70 yards. They think it's safe to eat. Bush, you've got a new bait for your armoury.
Speaking of the carp anglers as well, I see as a company that we've also got a very, very well-known angler on board in Andy Little. So how did all that one come around?
Well, Andy had been taking a liking to what we were doing from, I would say, end of summer last year. We were putting lots of posts about barbel that were being caught, because I'd then taken on the likes of Paul Potter, Simon Eben, Chris Michaels, and these are all bailiffs down on Throop. They started using a lot of the baits down there, and Andy was liking a lot of the posts that were coming up. And Paul and I were joking to each other, say, you look, one day Andy's going to ask to come on board. Stone me a couple of months later, Andy makes a phone call. He asked if he could try some of the baits. I had 18 different baits by this time.
The website was quite overloaded with baits.
I decided on your instruction and a couple of others to drop a few of the baits, because it just got too much for people and they were getting confused. One of the baits that I dropped was the big squid. It worked, but it hadn't worked as much as I thought. Paul Potter asked me about the baits that we used to do, and I went through it and he said, oh, I like squid, can you knock me up 5 kilos? And I said, right, okay. So I knocked up some 14mm big squid. He went fishing down on the Stour. He started catching barbel to over 14 pound on it. And he said, it's really, really nice, I love it. Paul's catch rate just suddenly just went like that. He was catching so many fish that everybody else that was fishing on through was saying, what are you using, what are you using? So he was handing out samples, and within the space of a couple of months, loads of people from the Bournemouth area were phoning me up and saying, right, I want some big squid, I want big squid. And at the moment, that's the #1 seller.
The baits I'm really looking forward to using, if we're going back to Andy Little and when I'm coming on board, because I'm going to be concentrating quite a bit on the carp for the next couple of months, is the old carp mixers and old carp boilers that you used to use back in the 80s. That was very
interesting, because, as I say, at the time when Andy asked if he could come on board, it was more for the chub and barbel. He was catching some phenomenal fish. He's had big chub to over 8 pound down there. And the areas that he fishes, you've got the likes of Kenny Parsons on there, and everybody knows Kenny and the results that he's had. He was very happy catching lots of barbel. He actually caught the personal best chub and personal best barbel for the Hampshire Avon using the baits. And I was absolutely over the moon. I thought, for somebody of Andy's ilk to come on and catch personal best fish using something that I've made, not worthy, not worthy. Anyway, a few months passed and we were having a chat, and I just said to Andy, I said, well, what about the old days when you were fishing Savvy? And he said that he used to use a seed mix, he used to use lots of maples, and he used to get this maple flavouring from a flavour house in London. He swore by it. He caught loads and loads of fish from Savvy, Bit 3 at the time, and some other places. There was, I think he even fished Frampton. He caught loads of it, but then after a while, the flavour house stopped producing the maples, and he developed it and went on to something completely different. So I said, well, what about if I try to replicate this maple flavour for you? He said, right, you go for it. So I went on to my flavour house, knocked up 3 sample matches. I sniffed them, made up some mixes. I thought, well, that one smells really good. So I made up a 5 kilo batch, sent it down to Andy. He said, that's the bait. He said, that is it, without a doubt. So I said, well, how do you feel about me doing some old-fashioned handy little baits, going back to old school days? He said, well, it wouldn't hurt. I said, well, what flavours were you using that you think could come out? He said, well, obviously the maple nut. So I said, right, that's a given. He said, I did really well on a fermented anchovy. He said, I used to get anchovy powder from an Oriental supplier, but you can't get it anymore. So he said, that would be something for you to try and source. He said, I really liked juicy, fruity type smells. He said, I always wanted tutti fruities in my armour, because he was obviously big into rituals back in the day. But he said he loved the smell of tutti fruities, so that's something, if I could combine that with another fruity smell to give a sort of juicy, fruity smell. And then he said, on Frampton he used to struggle with bird life because it's quite shallow in parts, and they'd go down and take his baits. He said, if you could do a bait that breaks down quickly and just leaves a load of seed particles on the bottom, but obviously do separate hook baits that last. So I said, right, that's my challenge. So over the coming months or so, I made up these different batches, sent them down to Andy. He agreed on all 4 of them. So we thought, right, this is what we're going to do. So we did a Facebook promotion where we offered to give away packets of each flavour, you know, like and share, this sort of thing. And I was absolutely blown over by the amount of people that took part in it, the amount of shares. There was over 500 shares, and I think there was 25,000 people that actually seen the post. So we had 2 winners in the end. We sent them out. They've done really well.
I'm looking forward to trying it. It's one thing, one bit I'm really, but I'm also looking forward to the birdseed one, the one that breaks down as well.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking of fishing the maple nut over the top of the birdseed.
I don't think that that's going to be a bad thing to do, because I say the idea is it's 80% birdseed. There's a tiny amount of egg powder in it, and there's a lot of rock salt in the Himalayan rock salt, which I've condensed into a brine, and I've made the solution using just the brine and a small amount of aniseed, which I've added to the seeds.
I think with the rock salt in that, that's probably going to be not only in all round, but especially springtime when they're going on to spawn. As we all know, carp, they're looking for those minerals at that time of year. You often see them flashing over minerals when they can find them, etc., and things like that. So I think that added brine, the Himalayan rock salt, that bait could be phenomenal in the spring as well.
Yep, I say there's just the smallest amount of egg powder in it. There's no eggs used in it, it's just the brine. So it's quite coarse and it's quite difficult to roll it because of the seed. So I had to mill it because I do all my own in-house milling now. And I've got it down to a state that the seeds were quite fluffy. There's still a few little coarse bits in it, but I could then start to roll boilies with it, because up until then I was only doing dumbbells because I just couldn't get the round shape on it. I boil it for less than 30 seconds and I dry it for 48 hours, and they look like marbles and they're black. Did a tank test with them. After 6 hours they start to actually break apart. If you waft the water, I know it's only in a jar, but if you waft the water, then you can see it moving around and it's just falling apart. It's just layer after layer, like an onion peeling itself. After 24 hours, it's just a bed of seeds, and you sniff the water and all you can smell is all the seeds, the aniseeds, the oils coming out of the seeds. And you think you've got that lying on the floor with your pup-up or your bottom bait, which is a proper boilie, which is going to last, and you've just got all this seed attraction around you. The birds can't see it, they're not going to dive down and get little bits of seeds. You've just got the one bait, so you're narrowing your chances of being picked up by coots and things like that.
It's something I'm really looking forward to using.
I think there's also some mileage on the rivers with it as well.
Yeah. Obviously the breaking down on the rivers, again, it's something different. It's something that you don't see, especially on the trend.
Yeah.
So there could be some mileage in down the river as well, even using it as a hook bait.
Yeah, I say with the fermented anchovy, which absolutely reeks, and the juicy fruits, we've got 4 baits that I'm sure there's a few carp anglers that like the old school ways, because I think you've seen on Facebook and that everyone's going back to the old stainless and they're getting their old Delkims out.
I even saw a picture the other day, someone using monkey climbers. I've not seen them for donkeys.
I've still got my solar monkey climbers. I was actually thinking about bringing them down, but I thought it's not going to work on a pod.
What do you see happening in the future? Have you got any plans regarding the baits or anything, or what would you like to do?
I want to grow it, but I'm not greedy. I don't want to be one of these big companies because there's so many of them out there. I'm quite happy continuing to make bespoke flavours that not anybody else does.
That's one of the great things about the Hookbait Company, while I've been on board as well. With a lot of bait companies, you're stuck to what they supply.
Yeah.
Whereas I know with yourself, if somebody says, "Can you make me this?" you'll go out your way to make it for them as well. Yeah. Even if it's something that, as a company, you don't make or produce. If I came up to you and says, "Darren, can you make me something that tastes like a nice lolly knobbly bobbly and it's got hundreds and thousands all over it and everything," you'd make it. But you know what I mean. It's the concept of you will go out of your way to make that bespoke. If somebody's thinking to them, got an idea where they say, I think this bait might work on this water, and you're the type of person that they can go to, and you'll help them develop that bait as well.
That's it. I like to think that now I've got enough knowledge behind me, because I've been doing it for so many years, that I understand the mechanics of making baits now. Obviously there's still things that you can get wrong. I make up test baits all the time and they don't always work, but that's the idea of having testers. They give the input and say, yep, that works, that doesn't work. Okay, if it doesn't work, let's scrap it and go on to the next thing. So I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. I'd like to grow it so that obviously there's more people using it. There is a new website being developed, because obviously the one that you made has done us really well, but it's now dated. People want to see interactive websites. You're a very busy man, so one of the other testers, he comes from an IT background, and he on his own back for some bait, he's made up a website. He's just waiting for photos to come through, and then we'll get that up and ready. People can actually start sending in films of their captures, and that can go on the website. People can ask all sorts of questions and see the photo galleries.
It'd be probably really
There'll
nice
even be a part where you can suggest a bait and get interactive with it.
I mean, if there's people wanting to ask yourself or any of us as consultants for any of the team questions and anything as well, it's a great way to interact with us all on there. It is,
But obviously I want more people to get involved and get to use the bait, so the idea is to try and get into a few tackle shops. I've managed to get into Bournemouth Angling at the moment. They've been very helpful in promoting the bait. If I can take on another half a dozen this year, then that would really help the cause, because obviously it's all well and good selling goods online, but you have to pay carriage, and some people don't like paying carriage. So if I can get into a tackle shop and direct them, say, right, you can go and pick them up from there, happy days. Also with the shop, they've got different ranges of bait, so online you order what you want, but if you're there in a shop and you can see everything there, you can take what you want, plus you're also helping out the shopkeepers, because everything's tough at the moment. Everything's bought online these days, and we need to actively help.
You need to still support your tackle trade.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, I want to build it up so that I can make a nice comfortable living out of it. This is all I do now. I don't do any more of the hospital work. I've just put my heart and soul into doing this. It's still all done by hand, but I will be looking into getting machinery, because there's a couple of avenues I want to go down where I need to make some bigger batches of bait to do something that I want. I'm not going to say anything about it at the moment, but I want to join forces with somebody and get something going, but to do that I need machinery, so I can chug out the bait for that particular process whilst carrying on doing what I'm doing. Eventually it will come down to rolling, but I'm not going to compromise the quality of the bait. If it doesn't come out properly on the boiling machine, I will continue to do it by hand, because I use lots of rough ingredients. I'm sure you and other people are aware that some of the bigger companies, to make the baits go through the boiling machines at the rate that they do, they have to have a super soft paste basically, so seeds and nuts and things like that don't go through the rollers very well, so they're compromising on quality a little bit. Yeah, they may add extra flavours and bits and pieces, but I like fish to have a bit of a crunch, because that's what they do naturally. They find snails and things like that, they like to bite down on something, so I'll always be doing that, but I want to build it up so that it's a name that will become more reputable on other rivers around the UK. There's certain rivers at the moment where we're just fishing on the Trent, fishing on the Stour, fishing on the Hampshire Avon. I want a few more elsewhere to find out exactly how the baits work.
So are there any plans then to take any more testers?
looking to take on some testers. I want obviously some people with a carp background to come on board, but also the barbel and the chub anglers too. Because I say we haven't got much coverage in the North or the Midlands at the moment. That's what we need, so we're looking for people to send in a potted history of what they do, where they fish.
So if there's anybody out there who is, obviously if you're going to be representing the company, you need to be out as much as possible, so you need to be fishing every week or two.
You've got to be every week.
Yeah, and you need to be able to take some decent photographs, some self-takes, and maybe be able to put a few words down and to talk about
articles
what you've done.
Are always good, photographs are brilliant, but the odd blurb on things like social media, Facebook, whatever, that always helps. I don't like blasting the baits around. There's certain companies that say their bait this, their bait that, and it just gets repetitive and you switch off. So you have a good result.
I think what you're saying, you're wanting from like a tester and consultant point of view,
I want the
quality rather than quantity.
I want the story involving the capture of the bait. I don't want it just the bait did this, the bait did that. Yeah, it's all good, but I want a rounded version.
So you'd rather have something that's put together really, really well, something done every now and then, rather than every fish, boom, it's on social media, that type of thing, which obviously I do it myself. I know when people are just spamming social media, every group, every page with the same pictures, you just skip past it. That's not what we want. We want something that's going to hook somebody in, that's really well written, really nice piece of quality work, and we concentrate on that rather than just spamming social media.
Yeah, rather than spamming social media, and the thing that you need to be doing is telling your mates about it, not going on Facebook about it, because they'll say, well, let me try that then. You've given them some bait. Oh, I like that. Where do I get it from? And that's how it gets. Word of mouth is a lot better than say this, and you just, no, not another case, I'll switch off.
It's the same when I'm being down here at Sutton. I've had lots of people over the years ask me what bait I'm using. Then all of a sudden, as you know, I'll be on the phone to you, Darren, I need so many kilos of this, and then you'll send it down, then I'm fetching it when I'm here for people to pick up from me. So word of mouth is really important as well, and your contacts and your networking and things like that as well. So if there is anybody out there that is interested in coming on board, just get in touch with myself or Darren, and we'll have a chat, and we can obviously sort them out some bait at tester's rate, and let's see what you can do. But is there anything that you want to finish off with it all now?
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that's involved with hook baits. I don't think I've ever had a team the calibre as what we do at the moment. We've got some really, really good names on board. We've taken on, say, the likes of Andy Little, and we've now got Kenny Parsons on board, and
another
a fabulous chub angler.
And let's not forget Ian McDonald as well, Drennan Cup winner a couple of years ago.
Ian is one of these people that he just goes out and he catches fish after fish after fish, and he doesn't like to plaster it about, but when he does catch a decent fish, then he likes to.
It's usually a Drennan Cup winner.
There's some phenomenal anglers out there, and long may it continue.
Well, it's been a pleasure to catch up, Darren, and hopefully we'll be on the banks again somewhere soon. Yeah, let's hope our fortunes change later on when this starts to drop down a little bit. It's really, really hot at the moment, and I can feel it on my head. You need a hot, mate. Just a little bit, yeah. Okay, thank you for tuning in and catching up, everyone. See you later. Cheers.